Hello and welcome to the Chris Wolfe Podcast on iCode Media. Today I had a great conversation with Jeremy Burroughs from CARR Real Estate. It was a lot of fun for me. I learned a bunch. Please enjoy our conversation. As always, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, write a review, share it with your friends, and support those who support us. Listen, if you're trying to enhance a protocol in your practice and you're trying to answer whether or not you can integrate this protocol in a way that allows you to take care of patients who have both medical and managed vision care needs, we've got the thing for you. It's called Total Patient Care, iCodeEducation.com. We also have a mastermind group that is quickly forming and quickly filling up for this summer that's going to start and launch on June 1st. So don't wait, get access. We'll have a coupon code now in the show notes that will allow you to access that at a discount and jump on board with the Summer Mastermind Total Patient Care Group. It will help you answer the questions that you're struggling with within your practice to integrate new protocols and new disease state management. Check it out, iCodeEducation.com. That's EYECODE education.com. One of the challenging things with patients is that when they invest in a really high quality pair of glasses and customized lenses, occasionally it can be difficult to keep those lenses clean, scratch-free, and smudge-free. Now, we have the ability with Crizal Sapphire HR lenses to offer our patients a best-in-class anti-reflective coating that is also resistant to scratches, smudges, and deposits. This means that patients spend more time enjoying clear and comfortable vision and less time caring for their lenses. So remember that you can provide patients with the best in quality, best in class, transparency, clarity, durability, and UV protection in a single Crizal coating. If you want to learn more about Crizal Sapphire HR, contact your Essilor account executive or visit essilorpro.com/Crizal. I think that there's a lot of optometrists that are kind of thinking through how do we negotiate properties, how do we own properties. It's something that we do so infrequently that it can be a challenge when you do it. So knowing what we can negotiate, what's harder to negotiate in this sort of market, I think would be worthwhile having a discussion on.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know about you, but so far I haven't met any optometrists who, after they got out of residency, they're like, yeah, we also had, about 120 hours of training in real estate while we were, in residency. It just doesn't seem to happen. That's pretty common. And it's not just, it's not just optometry. It's dental, it's veterinary, it's medical, it's chiropractic. It's every healthcare professional. You guys are trained in a very specific field, as a clinician, to do a very specific thing, and that's where your focus is. But unfortunately, it's a bit of a disservice for those who are going to come out who are going to also be small business owners, and that's what you guys are for the most part. Optometrists are small business owners as well as clinicians. Yeah, and so that kind of really leads me into, in this market right now, if you were going to, let's say you identified. So we'll get to kind of leasing in a second, because I think it'll build on our conversation related to purchasing. But let's say you had identified a piece of land that you could build on. Mm-hmm. What would be the types of questions that we should think about, or that we should ask to just know, all right, is this a valuable, or is this a good investment? Yeah. Okay. Well, it's funny. I actually just got done teaching a course about this at our national training on land, because I think I've done more land deals than anyone else in our company. So I didn't realize we were going to be hitting this today. So it's just perfect timing on that. But you've got to understand, what is your goal with the land? Okay. You're not buying land to say, hey, I now have this half-acre, 1 acre piece of commercial property sitting over here, and I'm going to use it to have picnics on Sundays. No, you're not buying land as an asset. Yes, it is an asset. In fact, it's one of the best assets that you can invest in, because without something extremely detrimental happening to the land, like toxic waste being dumped on it or something, it's going to not only retain its value, but it will actually increase in value. It will always appreciate. It's one of the few things that we tell our clients. They find out when we buy a building or we do a project like this. They find out from their CPA that we have to put a value on the land, because that can't be depreciated. because land does not depreciate for the most part. It only appreciates, whereas the building and everything else on it is going to depreciate. So that's the first thing we look at is, well, why are you buying the land? You're not buying the land as an asset. Some people do. There's a lot of people who buy land as assets and they just let it sit. And for that, that's an investment purchase. Well, you're buying this to build your practice on, to build a building on, maybe to build something that's more than just your practice. It's a larger building, maybe a retail strip or something like that. You're wanting to get into more of almost type, investment real estate. But what you're doing is you're looking at this from the point of, what am I going to do with the land? How can I accomplish my goal as quickly as possible? And for the most part, that's probably not going to be just going out and buying the dirt. It's going to be working with someone, say you come to us, we sit down, we go, okay, doc, what are you wanting to do? You want to do a, 2,500 square foot clinic. Oh, you're also wanting to do a little extra space as well. Okay, well, let's sit down. Let's figure out, are we going to work with a developer? Do we need to go get an architect? Do we need to, do some initial due diligence just to find out if this, is zoned properly, or do we have any easement issues? I mean, there's lots of things that come into play with land. I tell you, that's one of the most complicated purchases that you could do in commercial real estate is land. Buildings are easy. Okay.
So
buying land and building something, that's tough.
And so you said, you brought in a couple other things. You talked about, okay, well, do we use an architect or a developer? Describe the differences from your perspective of why would you use one over the other?
Absolutely. That's two different models. Really, it's kind of an architect-driven model versus a developer. I'll call it a developer. The word developer, honestly, it has different meanings to different people. We'll just call it the build-to-suit model, okay? Because the build-to-suit model could use just a build-to-suit contractor. It could use a person who's actually a developer who says, hey, look, I'm the guy who takes it from raw land to finished product. I deliver you finished product ready to go. I think almost like a custom home. When somebody goes and says, man, I want to build a home on that piece of land over there. Well, they hire a home builder who helps them do all that. And the home builder says, yeah, sure, go talk to that architect. Here's the architect over here we use. And I'll start having my guys look at engineering. And they kind of have a team already around them that is doing the architect, the engineering, help you with design, help you, interior design, picking out all the different stuff that you need to pick out, as opposed to going and doing what would I call the architect-driven model, which is someone who's going to say, man, I want to go and I'm gonna go with an architect, and I'm gonna start spending money with an architect, and we're going to design this building to hopefully fit this piece of land, and hopefully you've got a piece of land already picked out. Believe it or not, I've actually had clients who did not have a piece of land picked out. They just went and designed a building, which is wonderful. You can always design a building. But then now you have to hope that the piece of land that you're going to buy fits it, and it doesn't always do it, because of easements and ingress and egress and all these other things. It doesn't always work that way. And so I always caution somebody, please don't go start spending money until you've at least picked out a couple of options as to where you're going to put this building. But that's really the difference. Is an architectural driven model is all about design. It's all about, let's get the building exactly the way we want it. And I would say people who are just not detail oriented, but let's just say who want to control every single little step of the process and who want to be involved with every little step of the process, maybe an architecturally driven model could be better for them, because they're going to have to do a lot. You're going to have to be involved in a lot of that stuff. Whereas a build-to-suit model tries to take your budget in mind, tries to take it tries to put as many things together as we can. That way you've got one guy that you're dealing with who then has he has the architect, he has the engineer, he has the team, the construction company a lot of times as well, and can just deliver that product within a budget, as opposed to, let's just go design a beautiful building and then we have to get it priced out and we find out, it priced out a lot higher than what we expected. So now we got to go back to the architect, do more redesigns. And it's a different model. There's not one that's better than the other. There's just certain people that are going to gravitate towards different models. And as an agent, my job is to have my client's fiduciary, their best interest at heart, and to look at them and kind of help them go, yeah, you're more of a build a suit type of guy, or no, you're going to want to control every little part of this process. You probably should go, let's work with an architect, and then you get to pick your engineer, and you get to pick your design company, your interior designer, and you get to do all of this, and you're going to control the loan. You're going to have to cut checks, all that stuff.
Yeah, I would say that, just from because having not done that, I would say it's very similar to, you want to function as remodeling your house, and you're going to function as the sort of general contractor, and you're going to find all the subs
General
versus
contractor. Yep.
hiring a general
Yep.
contractor and letting them do everything else.
Yeah, and the funny thing about that is because the DIY approach is honestly what we see as one of the biggest hangups in healthcare, in real estate, because let's just face it, healthcare professionals are very good. You guys are great at what you do. You're extremely intelligent people, and what happens sometimes is when you're extremely intelligent, you start going, well, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that, and yes, you can. But at the same time, is it worth your time?
Yeah.
Are you actually getting the best pricing on these things? Just as a real estate professional, I'll tell you right now, when I do commercial real estate, when it comes to residential real estate, I don't touch it. I don't go anywhere near. That is not that. I am not. Even though I could handle that, I'm going to hire somebody else to do that, because there are so many little nuances about that I don't deal with on a day-to-day basis, that they're going to know the market better. They're going to know pricing better. And when you hire a general contractor, for the most part, instead of being your own GC and going and hiring each individual sub, you actually get better pricing from those contractors. I mean, because those subs, they work for that general contractor all the time. You're a one-job guy. So, I mean, I know this because my family has a history in construction. I've got multiple family members who are in construction. And when I hire a single contractor, my pricing's not as good as the pricing that sub gives the general contractor, because that general contractor is employing him on 15, 20 jobs a year.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that all makes sense. I think so the next step is you've identified the land, you decide that you're going to kind of do this all in one, like, we'll call it a general contractor, because that's the way my brain thinks.
Yeah.
What do you do next?
Exactly.
I mean, do you buy the land first? Do you go to the bank first to do the whole project? Like, what is typical in this sense?
Well, I'll tell you that for our clients, we will, the moment a client comes to us, and let's just say you're my client and you came to me and said, Jeremy, I want to go buy some land and build a building. I'm going to say, great, Chris, who's the bank that's financing this? That's going to be my first question. Okay. Because if we don't have that lined out, and at least have your financials to the bank, have it where they've taken a look at it and they've given us just kind of a shoot from the hip number of, yeah, no, absolutely. You could do easily a 1.5, maybe up to a $2 million project without too much, without pushing your finances too much. Well, that gives us the information we need to even go find what land are we looking at, because land varies greatly in its price. So what land can we even look at? And then it lets us know, well, should we be going at more of just a project for you, a larger project? What are we wanting to do here? So that budget honestly should guide everything. So the bank, in our estimation, every time a person comes to us and they have not gone to the bank, that's the first thing I'm telling them is let's go to the bank. Let's do that. I'll start doing initial research. I'll start bringing up our options. But it's the same way as if you go to have a real estate agent on the residential side, you want to go buy a house, or you want to buy land and build a house. They're going to go, great, what are you pre-approved for? And that's because without that number, we're just shooting in the dark. And we can be showing you great pieces of land that can't even fit your budget.
Right. Yeah. So that's very helpful. And so then let's say that you've done that. You've gone to the bank. Are banks, with professional buildings, like let's say you're going to build a professional building, and you're going to house maybe the option of, 3 to 4 different professions in it. Maybe, it's going to be a professional building, and you've got some extra space for other people. Are there still banks that are doing, I mean, I've seen some stuff from a few banks where they'll finance the whole thing.
Absolutely.
Is that still common?
Financing. It's not common. There are some banks who do that. So you brought up something in that question that really is going to be the divergent point of really these projects, and that is, are you doing a project that houses either only you or where you will occupy at least 51% of that project? Okay. So you could build, let's just say you wanted, pretty standard optometry office, 2,500 square feet. You want 2,500 square feet, but you go, man, all of my buddies are telling me that I should have more lease space in this building. It'll help pay for my own, my mortgage, which is true. And so we go, okay, great. So we're going to build a 5,000 square foot building. That way you can occupy 2,500 square feet. We'll say 2,501. That way you're just over that 50% margin. That is considered owner occupied real estate. Okay. Owner occupied real estate is financed at a totally different level than investment real estate. So owner occupied is what you're talking about, where a lot of these banks can do 100% financing. I say a lot. A few of the banks can do 100% financing. The standard for owner occupied is a bank will do 80 to 85% LTV. So that's loan to value. So they will loan, if the project, the whole project's going to cost, let's just say $1 million, they will loan you 850,000 of that. That's the maximum they'll go. You have to bring 150,000, down payment to the table. Well, if you have a bank who's doing 100%, they're probably doing, what they're doing is one of two things. It's either going to be a type of SBA loan, where SBA, you can get a lot lower down payments. There's different, different things that go with that, typically higher interest rates, but it's a longer term. It's a 25-year fixed term. There's banks like Live Oak who do, a lot of SBA lending in optometry and a lot of other healthcare professions. But then any bank can do an SBA loan, but there's two different types of them. But let's just put that aside. So it's either an SBA loan, or it could be that you're doing a conventional loan. If they're going to achieve that 100% financing, they're going to have to pull that money from somewhere. And normally what they're doing is they're looking at the value of your practice and they're actually borrowing against that. Okay. So you're still, in essence, really putting a down payment on it, but you're not putting cash on the table. Okay. It's coming because you've got a practice that's already going, that's worth a certain amount of money. So startups, it's not going to work for a startup. But a practice that's already going, say you've been practicing for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. Well, they simply look at that and they can value that practice and go, yeah, you've got X amount of collections. Cool. Yeah, you can, your practice is worth this much. We'll borrow against that. And it's a great way to do it. I mean, honestly, Chris, this is very smart banking for them to be able to do it. But not that many banks can do that, because not that many banks understand healthcare and your cash flow. It's very complex. And we work with the banks who do that, because some of our clients, they really want that. And so here's the 100% financing option. Some of them go, no, I want to put 10, 15% down because I want to get the lower interest rates. I want to get the better terms, because you typically get a little better terms, when you're putting cash on the table. Yeah, and so then they'll go at it that way.
Yeah. So then, okay. So that kind of brings us into where I want to transition a bit and talk about what you were expecting to talk about, which is leasing, because then we get to kind of actually have the conversation about leasing as the owner, right? Like, what do I want if I own this building? I want to lease to myself, but also lease to, other docs that might be occupying space. But then I also have to take into account the fact that I'm leasing from myself. So at a fair market value. So let's walk through that. What types of things would I, as the building owner, want to consider, and then also as the lessee want to consider as well? Yeah,
exactly. You're lessee and lessor. It's I love it when my clients, we sit there and talk about it and the different hats they have to put on. And the biggest thing I'll tell you, okay, so let's just take the example of you are your own building, you're your own tenant, because that will play in all the other scenarios. Yep. So you are the owner of the building. You have a mortgage. That mortgage is going to have principal, it's going to have interest. That, the way we look at this, we go, okay, so as the owner of the building, you're going to have to pay that much money to the bank regardless, no matter what. So as the tenant, as a landlord, you want to make sure that your tenant is covering over that number, because you want profit too, because you're a landlord. Right. So you want profit on your investment. So you want to look at that, and the principal and interest payment that you pay monthly, that is the bare minimum that you want your practice to be paying to your holding company, your LLC, that's your holding company for the building. So that's the minimum. it's easy to set it up on something called a triple net lease, where basically the tenant is responsible for all utilities in their own name, okay? And the tenant pays their pro rata share of taxes, insurance, and common area maintenance, which is basically all the expenses the tenant pays, and then the landlord really is just responsible for for the building itself and taking care of it. And if they if they have to restripe the parking lot or something like that, well, that goes into common area maintenance. So it all gets pushed back to your tenant in that sort of triple net lease, which is kind of what you want. You don't want it to be anything where you're left at the end of the year going, oh man, I should have charged myself more as a tenant because I had some expenses that came up as a landlord that I didn't pass that direction. So that's the minimum. Now, the maximum, what I would tell my clients is charge yourself as much as we can justify as a market rate. Okay, I'm using the wonderful air quotes because a market rate is a very objective thing. It's like, hey, well, really, what is a market rate? It's what a landlord and a tenant agree to. But there is some parameters, or there are some parameters that the IRS will look at. And right. So your CPA will look at this and go, you're charging yourself $60 a square foot for your rent. I don't think I've ever seen one of those in this market. So, you can get with a professional. We can kind of help you set that market rate. But honestly, as long as you're not grossly outside of that market rate, you're not going to raise any red flags. You could easily, as a landlord, say, well, I want to receive 25% profit on my money. And so you look at your principal and interest, multiply that times 1.25. That'll get you 25% interest on your investment that you've had here. And as long as that number is not hurting the practice, well, then do it.
Right.
Because all you're doing is you're increasing your rent, which increases your tax deductions as a tenant. You're putting more money that is necessary into the holding company that pays the mortgage. So for you as well, as you're pulling out of your right pocket, putting it in your left pocket. And then at the end of the year, if there's money left over, which there should be in that LLC, that is the holding company for the building, well, now you can take that and you can pay down the principal faster instead of just letting it go that way. So you're really kind of maximizing your deductions on all sides. Now, I'm not a CPA, neither do I play one on TV. So please make sure you always get with your CPA and you talk to him about those strategies and what works best. Because you never want to. The big thing is your practice is the driving engine. You never want to hurt your practice. You never want to cash flow strap your practice for the building. And we have this happen all the time where clients come to us and want to go from leasing to owning, and their appetite for the building is larger than what they should do for their practice. And so we have to kind of help them bring that down and go, no. Practice is first. Yes, this is a great investment. Yes, real estate, this is a wonderful building. But at the end of the day, that you have to stroke that check for principal and interest first before you can get the payment. And so it's all got to work out. Really, it kind of has to cash flow for that whole year. It can't just be every month you're passing it back and forth because it's going to get tight and you don't want that to happen.
Right. So, all right, let's say, it's hard when you're negotiating with yourself, but let's say that you don't own the building. If we transition into saying, all right, well, I can't own a building yet, but maybe I want to renegotiate the existing lease. It's time up and I'm about ready to re-sign. What are negotiables in this market? Well,
the old adage is everything's negotiable. Okay, and that's not true. There's a lot of things
I've
that are
learned
negotiable. There's a lot of things that are negotiable, and there are some things that are non-negotiable, especially when it comes to a third party. So when there's a landlord, and this is what we deal with a lot, especially in certain markets. Certain markets are high leasing. Just the national average, so you're aware, the national average for optometrists leasing their spaces is going to be about 80%. 80% of all optometrists are going to lease their space. Only 20% own. Now, what you'll find is in different areas of the country, that number may push up to 100% because there's no way they're owning. Most optometrists are never going to be able to buy a building in Orange County, California, unless you've got one heck of a practice going. But then you hit markets like mine in Oklahoma where, no, we've got probably around 30-40% ownership that they could very easily. And so that's where you're going to average out there. But The thing that we're going to, as an agent, I'm always going to go after it's a balancing act. I always tell my clients, think of a panel, a wall that has a panel on it, and it's got levers all over. It's got about 7 or 8 different levers. Well, if I really want to pull the lever down of lease rate, I really need to get that lease rate down. Well, consequently, another lever is going to go up somewhere else for the landlord. It may be that the landlord goes, okay, well, if the lease rate's going down, I can't give you $50 a square foot in tenant improvement allowances. Okay.
Right.
Oh, okay. Well, so if my client says, man, I need to, I'm doing a startup. So it's a startup client. And he goes, man, it's going to cost us $185 a square foot to build out the space. I've got the space where I need it, but the loan that I'm getting from the bank's only giving me X amount of dollars for build out. Well, it's not even enough to cover it. So then what we're going to say is, okay, we need to bring that lever down of TI and really get as much TI as possible. But at the same time, that means the lease rate's going to go up a little bit. So it's really figuring out where the financials are and what is going to work for the tenant. Because when we're talking tenant improvement allowances, free rent, build out period, which is also a form of free rent, we're talking about the lease rate, exclusivity clauses, HVAC and electrical, all these kind of things that are built into how the landlord's going to deliver the space to us. All of this stuff, it's all dollars and cents. It all comes down to dollars and cents. And then really the biggest factor that helps us get more concessions from landlords is length of term. Okay.
Right.
When you say, man, I only want to do a 3-year lease. Well, when you're doing a 3-year lease, there's not a lot of wiggle room in there for lease rate. There's not a lot of incentive for the landlord to give you a lower lease rate and give you certain concessions at the same time. That's why in healthcare, it's pretty common to have 7 and 10, sometimes even 15-year leases. But that 7 to 10-year range is pretty common for most of our clients.
What happens if, let's say that the business sells and, who is it always, like, is there a way out of that? So let's say I decide I'm going to take a 10-year lease and then I sell my business, or God forbid it goes under, and like who's on the hook for that? And like in terms of those longer term leases, and do I have personal protections, or when I'm out and somebody else, a new entity buys my business, does that lease carry through with this new entity? How does that all work?
Yeah. That's a great question, Chris. So that moves from the business points, or it moves from the kind of the financial points of the lease that we talk about a lot. Everybody focuses on the financial points, what's my lease rate, how much TI am I getting, free rent, all that kind of stuff. And we need to have those where they necessarily need to be, or else the deal just doesn't pencil from the beginning. But then now you're looking at more of those business terms. Now, these are things that sometimes we will negotiate on, but a lot of times we will work in tandem with the attorney, because, we're negotiating through LOIs and things. Commercial, we don't hand contracts back and forth like they do in residential. We negotiate with LOIs and RFPs and things that are completely non-binding until we get to the point where both sides are going, yeah, I think the basic deal points are going to work here. Now, if you know that this is something like, let's just say you're a doc who has been practicing for 20 years and you're like, man, I only want to practice another 5, but I need to renew my lease. I need to, man, the space is kind of old. I need to put new flooring, new trim, new paint. There's a lot of money I got to sink into this. I don't want to do that because I'm just going to try to turn around and sell my practice, here in the next few years anyways. Well, that is something where we get called an assignability clause. And that is something that will be in almost every lease. And the language, there's some boilerplate language that you'll find in most of these things. But when we know that a person is looking to assign that lease or looking to sell that practice anywhere in the term of the lease, or sometimes even if it's not something that we know it's going to happen, we'll just make sure there's a little bit of language in there that says that the landlord can't unreasonably withhold you assigning the lease to someone you sell the practice to. But if we know that that's probably something coming up, we're going to push for even stronger assignability language that basically has it where you can assign the lease fully and wholly to another entity that is of like kind, who will buy your practice. It's just, we talk to the landlord about it. Most of the time, they don't care. If
right.
They know that healthcare is the most stable tenant on the planet. And so just to go back to your, something you said in your initial question, that is, well, what happens if my practice goes under? First of all, that's extremely rare. That is, very, very rare. That's one of the reasons why we're in healthcare, is that you guys pretty much don't go under, don't fail. That's why banks are willing to loan $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 to students who have only been out for a few years, who got a little bit of experience to go start up a practice, because they know the odds are in their favor of completing that practice and going 10, 15, 20 years. And then if something does happen, they're probably just going to sell the practice anyways. They're not just going to close the doors. So that's really the safeguard, is you've got the assignability for when you sell the practice. So that way you're now totally off the hook. And then most of the time there's death and disability clauses and stuff like that. Let's take the worst case scenario. Let's just say you died. Well, you've got death and disability, insurance that's going to cover. You're probably going to have a loan, maybe a loan on the practice, maybe a loan left on, your startup. Maybe you bought a practice and there's still some loan left on that. It's going to pay off your debts. And, landlords are they're subservient most of the time anyways to all that stuff. So, when you think about it, it's not like you're, let's just take the one example maybe that you were thinking of that wasn't death. And that is, hey, my practice does fail. What am I going to do?
Young and emerging presbyopes can be tricky. These patients want and need additional help at near, but they can be resistant to solutions that create even mild distance blur. The MyDay multifocal lens has been great for our presbyopic patients. It allows those patients to transition into a multifocal more easily. We've had this lens now for long enough that we've been able to see how simple transitions can be from an adaptation standpoint, from lower ad designs to higher ad designs. The MyDay multifocal material is CooperVision's softest one-day hydrogel lens and features Aquaform technology, combining the unique balance of high oxygen permeability with natural wettability in one material. The result is a highly breathable lens that keeps our patients' eyes looking clear, white, and healthy. So if you haven't started utilizing MyDay multifocal in your practice, I'd encourage you to reach out to your CooperVision representative to get started. As you know, patients with vitreous floaters are often frustrated by their symptoms. The challenge as clinicians is to offer solutions for our patients for vitreous floaters that are effective. But more often than not, the options of YAG vitreolysis and vitrectomy are not practical because the benefits don't outweigh the risks. That's where Vitreous Health from MacuHealth comes into play. Previously on the podcast, I've discussed the FLIES study with Dr. John Nolan, and the bottom line is that I can be confident prescribing this for my patients with floaters because I can tell them a large randomized placebo-controlled trial found that after 6 months of supplementation with Vitreous Health, floaters were reduced in size by approximately 30%, and 70% of patients had an improvement in their symptoms. Vitreous Health has been great for my patients, and we really feel like we have a viable option to treat patients with vitreous floaters now that we didn't have before. If you're not utilizing Vitreous Health for your patients, reach out to your MacuHealth representative now.
The next point I was going to go to is subletting. So, let's say you want to move.
Yeah.
And you identify how much, when you're negotiating on the front end, how much of that should you negotiate your ability to sublet? And then what's the average sort of boilerplate stuff that occurs within subletting? So it's like, man, I got 3 years left on my existing lease, but I got this opportunity for a building over here that can be done in a year and a half.
That's right.
There's probably something good about me being able to control who comes into my space. Tell me about that. How does that all work?
100%. Yeah. And that's so the subletting, the assigning, there's so many of these clauses that are just boilerplate in these leases, and what it will always come down to. And this is something we hear. We hear clients sometimes will say, and a lot of times they'll say it after their attorney, they've talked that we've sent the lease over to their attorney, and it's a non-real estate attorney. It's just their buddy who happened to be an attorney who's reviewing their lease. Please, Chris, don't do that. Please, anybody who's listening to me in the sound of my voice, do not use your buddy who's the attorney if he's not a real estate attorney to review your lease, okay? Attorneys specialize just like doctors do. So, he may be a great divorce law attorney or a great litigator, but he doesn't know what he's looking at for the most part. He does, but he doesn't know the standard language on a commercial lease. Find a guy who does that. I mean, we refer our clients' attorneys all the time just because we watch deals die in legal. Attorneys will blow these things up because they will go, this lease is totally in the landlord's favor. What's going on here? Why would we sign such a lease? And that goes back to my first point. Yes, the lease will always be in the landlord's favor. That language that is boilerplate. When you're a landlord, you're going to have a lease that's in your favor. Because, believe it or not, you're in the most risk. Okay, not the tenant. You have the most risk. And so that language is in there. So when you get to that assignability and that subletting, basically it's going to say the tenant shall not under any means, assign or sublet this, space, blah, 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 without landlord's prior approval. Okay, so that's just kind of normal. And then there's an extra line that we can get in there that just kind of covers the majority of situations. That is, and the landlord will not withhold that unreasonably. Okay, so if you get that language in, it just says, and the landlord won't withhold it unreasonably. That's easy to go, hey, dude, I found a tenant who's going to pay the rent. You can't tell me that they can't come in here and do this unless they're someone who's bringing some horrible use to the space or, something like that, or it conflicts with another, exclusivity in the area. So that's the normal language that we can get added into it. And sometimes it's already there because honestly, like I said, they don't care. They just want somebody to fill the space and pay the rent. And as long as you're doing that, they're fine. And so really they're very open to a lot of scenarios of subletting and assigning, especially to another, if you're assigning and you're selling the practice, man, that's another doctor coming in there buying it, or another entity, that's coming in that's buying it, maybe private equity's buying it or something like that. And then they've got, doctors who are going to run it. They don't care. They're happy. They just don't want this to, you to sublet it out to, maybe a CBD shop when that's going to be a second or third CBD shop in their strip.
Exactly. Yeah, I wonder where that brings up another question. Where the heck are they getting all that money? Like in Nebraska, this is crazy to me, and it must be just it's like
we're talking about the CBD money.
Yeah, I mean they talk about like big, you talk about big tobacco and. But there's no way a mom and pop. So in Nebraska, marijuana is not legal, and CBD there's no way they're bringing in enough money to cover the lease on the spaces that they have. So there's no way a mom and pop shop is opening these. There's got to be big marijuana money going in to establish roots so that when it happens,
it's crazy, Chris. That's exactly right. Yes. You're exactly right. So I'm in Oklahoma. We only legalized medical marijuana 4 years ago. Don't quote me on that one. 3-4 years ago in the recent future, or past, in the recent past. Yeah. But it's only been legal here medically for a while, and every CBD shop almost turned into a dispensary. And yeah, you're right. That's exactly what they're doing. They're going in. They're getting the foothold. They're finding out what landlords are amicable to this, because not every landlord is amicable to it. And it's not just that they have any type of, philosophical, problem with it. Most of the time, it is that they're just someone who is a little worried that the bank will call their note because, with marijuana being federally illegal, if you have a mortgage if you have a mortgage as a landlord on the entire property and you have a tenant who's breaking federal law, you can be held responsible. Like the bank can say, we're calling the whole note. We can't do that.
Yeah.
It rarely ever happens. This is something that, we even see now banks that are going as far as saying, hey, we're now the weed bank. We're now loaning. And then these are FDIC insured banks. The landscape is really changing in that area. Depend upon what your feelings are on that stuff. But yeah, but it still brings, most of those are CBD and vape shops. And at the end of the day, you look at it and landlords, like I said, they want tenants filling the spaces, which is why in every retail strip center, we always make a joke in our industry. It's like, okay, so the first 3 tenants that come in, it's always a nail salon, donut shop, and a CBD. There's your first 3 tenants in any given retail space. And then outside of that, all right, here's the massage therapist. Here's it's just, it is what it is. Which is one of the reasons why we have to be very careful. Our clients, you guys are running a very nice professional business. I mean, and it's got a good, especially optometry has a great retail component to it with selling high-end sunglasses and things like that. And you don't have control over your neighbors for the most part. So you really have to be careful of what spaces you go into, and we can't get language into most of these leases that says, hey, promise you're never going to put this type of tenant in the space. The landlord's like, nope, that's not happening. I will put it there who I want to put in there, and you don't get to tell me that. The most we can get is maybe a right of first refusal on the space that's adjacent to us to hopefully expand in the future if we need to.
Yeah. Well, so Jeremy, as a kind of a lay person in this space, what am I missing? What is something that we haven't talked about that you're like, Chris, this should be on your mind, whether you're purchasing land, building a building, or just renegotiating leases? What am I missing in all of this?
Here's the one thing that we haven't talked about yet, because we honestly jumped into some really good conversation, Chris. I've really enjoyed this. The thing that you need to be thinking about, okay, so the number one thing that you need to be thinking about is, as a non-real estate professional on the buyer-tenant side. Okay, now if you're a landlord, if you own property and you're looking to lease it out, you're looking to sell it, this doesn't apply to you, okay? You can go try to do it yourself all day long and hopefully save yourself maybe 2-3%, something like that. Kind of like for sale by owner on a house. I mean, I've sold multiple homes myself prior to being licensed, because once I got into licensing, I'm like, I'm not doing that anymore. Now I have to disclose, a whole bunch of stuff. But, so I did for sale by owner multiple times. And it's something where I can save the 2 or 3% on my side. I'm still going to have the buyer's agent come bring me a buyer most likely. So I'm going to pay them their commission happily. You bring me a buyer, I'm going to pay you your commission. So as a landlord or seller, you can try to save some money by doing it yourself. But as a buyer or a tenant, you're not saving any money ever. By doing this yourself. You're hurting yourself, because especially in commercial. So, residential, there's a lot of FSBO and all that kind of stuff out there. You don't see for sale by owner in commercial hardly ever. You see signs that say for lease, for sale, and it's got Colliers and CBRE and NAI and Cushwick and all these other guys on there. So that lets you know that a professional investor who invests in real estate, who owns that building, he's not even doing this himself. He's hired a broker to represent him. And you think as a healthcare professional, you're going to come in and get the best deal from these guys? No, it's not going to happen. And so that's the thing, that no matter if you're buying land, buying a building, doing a new lease, renewing a lease, that's the one that most of our clients don't think about. They honestly get caught off guard by the renewals, because they signed that initial lease. They didn't even know we existed. And then, their lease comes up, and what happens is that landlord is going to have a notification period that he has to let the tenant know that the lease is up and that he's basically want to find out if the tenant wants to stay. The tenant also has a notification period. Those two notification periods aren't the same. Tenant typically has to let the landlord know about 180 days in advance if he's going to stay. And the landlord only has to say something to the tenant 90 days in advance. So basically, they get to wait till you're cornered. They get to wait till they've got you exactly where they want you. And then they go, they basically walk in with a new lease, 90 days from expiration, slide that new lease, say, hey, doc, here you go. Here's your new lease for the next 5 years. Take a look at that and let me know if you have any questions, any problems. And then the doctor goes, oh, shoot, I forgot. My lease was coming up this year. I was wanting to move to a better space, or I'm growing like crazy. I need more space. And then now they're 90 days out from basically their lease expiring and the landlord being able to kick them out. And they go, there's nothing I can do. And so they kind of, they go back and forth and maybe hopefully get the landlord to get them a new coat of paint, in the space, not knowing that they've just left tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table. And so we come in when our clients, we help them renegotiate those leases, and we don't wait till that renewal. But we want to do this a year in advance, maybe even a little over a year in advance. If a person even mentions they want to own or do a building construction, I need to be talking to them 2 years in advance before their lease expiring. Okay, so that way we can have all those things lined out before that happens. So that's the number one issue. The number one problem that our agents face is when we meet a client, they go, oh, if only I would have known you 6 months ago. If only I would have heard about you, when I signed this lease. I'm 2 years into a 5-year lease. What can you do for me? And the answer is nothing. I can do nothing for you. And so I have to wait now until the right time period, and then we can do this again. The good news is a lease is always going to renew. Most of the time, it was shorter leases because landlords actually like to keep you on shorter leases. Then they don't have to give as many concessions, and they can kind of keep you on your toes. And they're always, sending new lease renewals over to you. There's different tactics that you find out that landlords will use, but which is why we use a lot of long-term leases, because for healthcare, it's best to get that fixed cost secured for the next 10 years if we can, because your rent or your mortgage payment, your rent especially, your rent is typically your practice's second highest expense. Payroll's number one.
Right.
Lease or mortgage is number two. And so if you can secure that for the next 10 years and know, hey, I've done my best. I negotiated ahead of time. I had a professional agent in there for me. He got me the best rate, the most concessions, all of that. We have literally saved clients. I mean, my personal best is $430,000, saving a startup client $430,000 on a 10-year lease. So from when their landlord, where the landlord started at his rent rate to what I got him down to, the amount of concessions, of tenant improvement allowances, of free rent, of all that kind of stuff, totaled up to $430,000 for a startup dental suite. Okay. 2 dentists going into a startup suite. But we've actually had 1.1 million, I think was our company's highest. That was on a medical one. Over a 10-year lease. Saved them $110,000 a year. Yeah. And that was on a renewal, by the way, the $110,000 a year. And they thought that landlord was their best friend, honestly. They're like, oh man, no, the landlord's great. Yeah, take a look at our lease. I'm sure you won't find anything. And the problem was they signed that lease, I think in like 05, 06, 07, something like that, when rates were really high. And then this was in 2010 or 11, when the market had crashed. The lease rates were a very big difference. Well, the landlord doesn't offer to take your lease rate down. He doesn't just walk up and go, hey, Chris, the leasing market's really kind of bad right now. I'm just really happy you're here. I'm going to go ahead and drop your lease rate by a couple dollars a square foot, because that's kind of the market rate right now. So would you go ahead and consider staying here for 5 more years? No, that doesn't happen. Annual increases every year is what happens. And so that's something that if you don't get ahead of it, if you don't have the right timing and the right posture, it's not just timing, it's timing and posture. When you go after this, it's going to fail miserably. And that landlord's going to say, nope, not going to do it. Nope, go find another space. And you're going to think, oh my gosh, this guy's, he's just unwielding. He's going to kick me out. And really, he's sweating bullets that any of his healthcare tenants are going to leave. And so we just have to have the right posture. And when you've hired an agent, that lets him know you now know what's going on. That agent knows the market. He's now told you what the market is. You guys are out there looking at other stuff. It's not just you as a doctor going, hey, could I get a little bit less on that rent rate? Maybe, could you put some new carpet and paint in here? No, it's a totally different posture.
Yeah. So Jeremy, when my listeners need to renegotiate their leases a year in advance before their lease is up, how do they get a hold of you? Where do people find you?
Simple, man. CARR.us, CARR.us. You go right there, and then you can go up to the top and click Find an Agent. And we have agents across the nation. We transact in all 50 states. In fact, hopefully by the end of this summer, or definitely by the end of the year, we will actually carry licensing in all 51 jurisdictions in the United States. So we'll be licensed to transact everywhere, which, to my knowledge, there are less than a handful of national commercial real estate firms that hold all the licensing. They typically will use, a broker's license in another area. But yeah, go to CARR.us, find an agent that will help you get in contact with the agent in your local market. If you just feel like giving me a call, you can find me there as well. Just go to Oklahoma. You'll see me listed down there. But this is something where we were created out of a need. I'm just going to tell you a quick story of our CEO, Colin, because honestly, this story says everything about our company and the heart behind our company. Colin worked for Colliers, which is one of the third largest commercial real estate company in the world. He worked for Colliers for almost a decade. And he saw, as a listing broker, dentists and optometrists and veterinarians calling these for lease signs and basically calling. And And as an agent, so when somebody calls that sign, then he calls the landlord and says, "Hey, we've got a potential tenant." And the landlord would ask a couple of questions. First question was, "What's the use? Is this a CBD shop, or is this a a donut shop? Is this a Jimmy John's? What is it?" And he would go, "No, this is a doctor." And then the second question out of the landlord's mouth would be, "Okay, so does he have any representation?" The answer was always no. So the answer was no, because nobody in commercial real estate, nobody represents the buyer-tenant side of the transaction only, and healthcare professionals like we do. I mean, there's very few firms that even do that. In fact, there's only one other national firm that represents the buyer-tenant side only, and they don't really do healthcare. They do much larger things. If you're a 50,000 square foot user, then they'll talk to you, not a 5,000 square foot user.
Right.
And so there was nobody out there helping physicians. And so when he would tell them, "No, there's no representation," then that landlord's like, "All right, tell them $35 a square foot." And then as the listing broker, he would go, "Oh, hey, just a reminder, the last tenant we signed there, was at $28 a square foot, not 35. And he goes, "Yeah, I know. You said this is a doctor, and you said he doesn't have any representation. Means he doesn't know what market is. Tell him 35. As a listing broker, your client, you have to be obedient to your client. And so you're just going to go back, and his job as a listing broker is to get the most money possible for your client. Well, that's what our job is on the tenant side, to get the most concessions possible for our client, to make sure that you are not paying any more than you have to on that lease, and that all the terms are as good as we can get it for you, because the guy on the other side is doing his job as well. So don't fault them for doing their job, and don't fault the landlord for trying to get as much money as possible as he can for his space. But just don't be an idiot, and and do this yourself, and go toe to toe with professionals who do this all day long.
Awesome. Jeremy, this has been a lot of fun. Okay. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Been great, Chris. Thank you so much for having me on.
You're welcome.